What is up YouTube, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video I wanted to talk about UPS delivery driver, seasonal delivery driver. For those of you that don't know what that is UPS hiring regular people like us to work for them for a temporary time frame. In this case was from October 1st all the way up to December 31st, with the specific season of Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and Christmas holiday time frame. So what is this specifically going to do for you? This is for those of you that want to either pay off some loans, need some additional cash, or simply just ended up not having a job for a certain period of time. So I will highly recommend for you guys to look into seasonal jobs, whether it's retail or whether it's UPS or anything like that. But today, for this specific video, I want to talk to you guys only about seasonal driver for UPS. Now, I have looked into the FedEx and other delivery jobs. However, they did not pay as much as UPS. So we're going to be talking about the pros and the cons of UPS driver, and ultimately whether or not it is something that you would want to do. Alright guys, as I already mentioned at the beginning of this video, the biggest thing that actually attracted me to UPS seasonal driver is that they actually paid the most. Out of all the seasonal job I was looking at for the period of October to December 31st, UPS was paying, here in Phoenix, Arizona, was paying $23 an hour. Now, most retails were not paying anywhere near that. Most of them were paying $19 an hour. And then if you actually look at their competition, which is for UPS competition would be FedEx, they were paying roughly about $19.50 an hour. So that is a pretty big gap difference. So I chose to go with UPS and just work for the season while I go full-time to ASU. While I was doing the UPS job, I'm going to kind of break down to you guys the actual pros and cons as mentioned. But ultimately, this video is not sponsored by them in any sort of shape, way, or form. I'm actually not even working for them at this point. I just did a simple contract, and I want to talk to you guys about it for those of you planning to do it next season. So right off the back, UPS seasonal driver has, like I said, one of the highest paying when it comes down to the season. Now, the secondary good thing about this is that you're going to be having a full-time job per se. Those of you that are looking to only do 20 hours a week, this might not be the route for you to go, because chances are you're going to be doing anywhere between 40 to maybe 60 in some cases. But chances are you're going to be stuck at about 30 to 40 hours a week. So if this is something that you're interested in and doing during that time frame, I will highly recommend for you guys to look at that. Now, the second pros I will tell you about UPS is that you have flexible hours to a certain extent. What does that mean? Some of the supervisors, and ultimately depending on where you're going to be working for, they're very flexible, and there's going to be a lot of us out there that are going to be doing the specific season. So as long as you let them know, hey, I have this commitment at this given time, they're able to just give you that day off. You don't need to take leave on your stuff. Now, obviously, you're not going to get paid for the time that you're taking off, but they're not going to be assholes per se and just kind of fire you because you're missing, you know, a few days here and there. Because at the end of the day, you're a temporary contractor, you're not a full-time employee. So that's the only real difference. So that's another pros. Now, I'm not saying this so you guys could abuse it. I'm simply saying, hey, this is a possibility for those of you that have, you know, kids and things like that and just need a temporary job. So UPS driver is definitely one way to go. Now, the other pros is that if you are a really hardworking person, like for me, example, I'm not trying to be cocky, but I worked really hard when I was with them, and they knew it. You know, they give you during the time frame, they give you about 30 to 40 stops, and I was able to finish that within an hour and a half, 2 hours. So what they usually do, I would just call back to center and be like, hey, does anyone else need some help? Is there anything else I can do for you guys? And usually they would have me help other drivers. So I would be having anywhere between 30 to sometimes 50 to 55 hours a week, mostly because just how proficient I was at what I was doing. Now, that is probably the third pro is that if you put in the work and you don't mind spending the hours and you don't really have any other commitment, that is the way to go if you're interested in making a quick bucks for the period of 3 months. Now, the other pros is ultimately for those of you trying to work for UPS. So what does that mean? UPS actually does hire people off the streets, meaning that it's not one of those things that you have to start from the bottom to the top. In some cases it is. UPS is one of those agencies where you have to start the warehouse, work or ultimately at the minimum wage job. in order for you to pack the trucks, and then they will look at pretty much promoting you to a driver. From what I heard in the past, some of those guys actually took about 2 years to even 7 years in some cases before they became a driver. Those of you that don't know, UPS drivers, the one with the big brown trucks, in some cases actually pay anywhere between, they start at about $20 an hour, I think now it's like about $22 an hour, and they go after 4 years up to $42 an hour. I don't know about you, but $42 an hour, there's not that many jobs out there that pay that within 4 years. In a lot of the cases, those guys, a lot of them make 6 figures. A lot of the UPS driver make 6 figures, which is why it's so competitive to become a UPS driver. So if this is something that you are looking forward to and you are interested in ultimately working for UPS, I will highly recommend for you guys to start the seasonal job and ultimately just kind of showing what sort of work ethic you have and whether or not you'd be a valuable candidate for the company. Now, it's not guaranteed you're gonna get an actual driver spot, because my understanding of it is for every one person that they hire off the streets, they need to put 9 people from the warehouse onto the driver position or into some sort of promotion, which in some cases that tells you how competitive UPS is. So that, you know, at the end of the day, you guys need to analyze and figure out whether it's something that you actually are interested in. Now, another pros with this is ultimately the tier system per se. UPS is a union-based job, and in most cases they actually have the seniority aspect of things, which is why you start at the very bottom and slowly make your way to the top over the period of the years that you work with UPS. Now, this can also be a con, which I will talk a little bit more about here in a second. Now, the final and probably the pros about it is that you do not need any secondary job. If you work at UPS for the season, actually this is kind of a con too, is ultimately they will tell you do not have any other commitment because you're going to be on call at all times. So usually the time frame is from 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. all the way up to 10 p.m. Those are the time frame that you're looking to be working at. But most of us actually finish anywhere, start usually between 8 and 9, and you'll be finished by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Does that mean that you guys can actually get a secondary job at 4, a star 4? That it is a very iffy, because chances are they might just give you more work. If you're able to call in and be like, hey, I need some more job, or do you have anything else for me? They will give you something else, and then you might not finish until 8 o'clock. So you have to be very careful on how you decide to do this, whether you want to have something else on the side, but they will tell you, honestly, do not have anything else on the side, which that's actually leads us to the con. If you work for UPS for the season, you're not going to have to be able to do 2 seasonal jobs, unless you're doing something overnight. But the thing with that is also the DOT actually regulates the amount of hours you can drive. So in some cases, if you think you're going to work for UPS during the day and drive with them during the day, and then you decide to get a different delivery job and drive at night, you can actually get a big ticket. In some cases, the DOT can actually figure out how many hours based on the different jobs you have, and you can get up to $10,000 fine from DOT, which is the Department of Transportation, for those of you that don't know what that means. So you have to be very careful how you decide to do this. Now, the second con that I would talk about in regards to UPS is the hours. So some of us, like I said, you know, I don't really particularly have any commitment. I don't have any kids. I don't have anything like that. So when it comes down to the hours, I didn't have any issues. But I know some people also had kids and has other commitments. And honestly, when you're working, if you're a good worker and you're working anywhere between 40 to 60 hours, it can get to become to the point where it's overwhelming. The biggest thing is there's no set schedule. You start at a specific time, but then you don't know at what time you finish. It comes down to how many packages you have in your truck, how many stops you're going to have, and whether or not they actually have you help someone else. So in some cases, there was days where I was finished at 1 o'clock, and there was other days that I'd be finishing at 10 p.m. So it really comes down to what sort of needs they have, and there's no real regular time frame as to when you're going to be finished. So if you have commitments like, you know, your kid's game, whether it's football game or your daughter's dance recital, you might miss all those things during that time frame. So you have to be very careful as to whether or not this is something that you want to commit to. The third con I'm definitely going to talk about is the seniority aspect. Like I said, that was a pro, but at the same time, I personally, as a temporary contractor for UPS, I would most likely tell you this is the biggest con that they have. For me, it was at the very beginning when you first start and you're doing anywhere between 20 to 30 hours, it's not too much of a big deal. But as you start getting more towards Christmas time frame, and a lot of the actual senior drivers, the permanent driver with UPS want to have additional hours, they get limited by UPS themselves. Some of the supervisors actually decide to take their hours away and give those to us seasonal in order for everyone to be limited about 40 hours a week, so they don't have to pay overtime to the senior driver who are making already $42+ an hour. So what does that exactly mean? What that means is ultimately you, who are going to be a temporary contractor, are going to have a lot of pissed off co-workers. In some cases, we have had incidents for technically with me too, where you're going to have some of the other drivers trying to pull their seniority card saying, hey, you're not taking this from me. I'm going to be doing this hours for the next couple of hours because I rate to do this. So it can be, in some cases, hostile environments, and it really comes down to how you're able to deal with that. But that is technically not really our fault or anyone else's fault, but that is something that you have to look at, is that some of those guys are losing hours in order for us to work those additional routes. Now this year was not as busy from my understanding because everything that's going on with the market and things like that, but it was still a very busy season, surprisingly enough. And honestly, it was very hectic when around December, or after Thanksgiving all the way up to the end of December, where we had a lot of issues with a permanent driver ultimately going against the seasonal and the actual PPP driver, which is their personal vehicles individuals, because since there was XYZ amount of packages, we'll be taking some of those guys as hours. Some of them were used to doing 12-hour shift, and now they were only doing 8-hour shift. So you have to be very careful and understanding on how things work within the atmosphere if you have not done any corporate job, and it can be very hectic in some cases. The final con in regards to UPS seasonal, it would definitely be the no guarantee job afterwards. So what does that mean? Is that whenever we first started, they all told us, hey, you guys can start right off the back as soon as you're done with the season at roughly about, I think the time was about $15.50 an hour, and just go straight to the warehouse. So a lot of people were just kind of turned off by that because they didn't want to start from the bottom. They actually wanted to drive right off the back because they have the driving experience. So that is one thing that I would tell you for con, was that the job, even though you did well and you busted your ass per se during that time frame that you're working, you're not guaranteed to start right off the back at the same rate that you're getting paid during the season. Most likely, you're gonna go back to $20 an hour, if not, like I think it was $21 an hour at the time, and you're taking a little bit of a small pay cuts, which is not much, but you're not even guaranteed to get that spot. Because, like I said, for every one of us that they take off the street in order for them to have us as driver, they need to hire or go through 9 of the guys that work at the warehouse. And a lot of those guys that work at the warehouse don't want to be drivers because of the crazy hours we have. So pick your battles, decide whether or not this is something that you want to do. If it is something that you're interested in doing to get your foot in the door and really just kind of want to have that network in a sense, then I would tell you go for it. But don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't gamble this in a sense of which you're quitting your regular 9 to 5, which you're making $60K a year, to try to make a 6-figure job with this company where you might actually end up making only $20,000 to $30,000 a year. So figure out exactly where you want to be. If you want to just do the season, then do the season. And then if you want to start at the bottom and eventually work your way to the top, then go for it. I will say for sure is that a lot of those guys for the last year or so, since the sickness that we had in the past, my understanding was that usually people that work at the warehouse, within 6 months they will actually be promoted to driver due to the actual turnover that's extremely fast lately. So it's up to you whether it's something you're interested in. Alright guys, if you enjoyed this video, I know it went a little bit longer than I estimated, but if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe icon if I brought value to you guys, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching.